darkness with tears of devotion.
Offered candles in prayer to your light.
How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come? Long I've called you, my Lord. Long I've called you. Many years I have longed for your sight. Bathe the darkness with tears of devotion. Offered candles in prayer to your light. How much longer, friend, must I cry your name? I am yours, ever yours. Will you come?
This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light. It's week 24, How Devotees Rise. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Last week we asked the question, why do devotees fall? And we considered the downfall of Judas in this context. Jesus, in answer to Judas's criticism for allowing Mary to rub his feet with spikenard, a very costly ointment, said, "The poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always." Jesus is saying here that there is one supreme injustice that needs eradication. Poverty, yes, but not of the material kind. Poverty in a spiritual sense. Divine blessings are not common in this world. They are extraordinary. When they come, we should give them priority above every other consideration. Never allow a moment of inner joy, for instance, to be set aside for lesser duties. Divine attunement is our highest priority. As Lahiri Mahashaya, the guru of Yogananda's guru, said, to listen to the heart's inner sound, Om, which issues from the very center of our being, is man's highest duty. Mary, on this occasion, was not communing in inner silence with Christ's Spirit, as she had been when Martha urged Jesus to reproach her for not helping out in the kitchen. Mary this time was serving outwardly, but in a very different spirit from the restless fussing for which Jesus had reprimanded her sister Martha. Those who see a radical difference between the paths of action and meditation should understand this distinction. To serve in the right spirit is necessary, for only thereby can we overcome our karmic tendencies toward restless activity. The important thing is that spirit be always inwardly focused, that in everything we do, we act in loving service to the Lord. Therefore, the Bhagavad Gita says in the 3rd chapter, the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one, by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement, can attain perfection. Whenever the Spirit of God descends upon you, however, remember the words of Jesus, "Me ye have not always with you." Thus, through the Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. 'Om, Om, 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 Om,
like to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is a book of prayer poems by Paramhansa Yogananda. This one is for children. Thou art the cause of everything. I bow to thee. Dear Heavenly Father, the moonlight reminds me that all darkness passes. The sun reminds me that my mind too should be bathed in light. The seasons change because that is how I can have food to eat. The seasons change also to teach me to adjust to all life's changes. Thou art behind everything, teaching deep secrets for living a better life. Always I bow to thee. This morning's topic, How Devotees Rise, is obviously one very close to our hearts. I wanted to explain the story a little more in case it's new to you. This was right before Jesus' crucifixion, right before he was about to leave the body, and Mary, in the presence of all the other disciples, all the male disciples in fact, took out this very expensive ointment and lathered his feet with it in a very loving devotional display that obviously some, and probably among them Judas, were a little affronted by. And then to wipe his feet clean, she used her own hair to clean them. So you can see what reverence and what devotion would be required to not only do that, but to do that in complete ignorance of your surroundings. And Judas said on that occasion, why, instead of saying, "Why are you so devotional?" he said, "Why did you not sell this ointment and in the marketplace and get 300 pence for it and give that to the poor? Wouldn't that have been more spiritual?" And Jesus said, "Let her alone. Against the day of my burying has she kept this. And the poor ye have always with you, but me ye have not always." And last week we explored at some length Judas's perspective on this whole thing and how devotees fall. But this week it's more Mary's perspective, how devotees rise. Now, the thing about Mary rising in this way, and even the way any of us rise, it's not like there is a spiritual ladder that we continue to climb, and as we rise, we get to the top, and we just say to God and the few other saints at the top, "I'm here," and they say, "Welcome, you won." And everyone else, "Oh well, don't you feel bad for them." That's more of what worldly attainment looks like, the one winner of the race and so on. On the spiritual path, if it is a race, when one person wins, we all win. So, when whoever first here gets to become the first saint in this batch, we all are blessed because now we live with a saint. And now we are sharing the spirit of a saint. So it's not a competition that way. But the mind can get kind of confused a little bit. I was certainly confused. When I first came to Ananda, I did what we call the discipleship training program, which is 2 weeks at Ananda Village. And when I first got there, Haridas and Roma, who were leading the training, said to me, "Would you mind leading sadhana?" I mean, I literally had my little suitcase in my bag and so on, and I was arriving. They said, "Would you mind leading the afternoon sadhana?" And I said, "Well, it would be my humble privilege." I had never led sadhana before. I had chanted and led a meditation and said Om at the end and so on. And so I felt, honored and, again, humbly privileged to do so. Then the next day they said, "Would you mind leading sadhana again?" And I said, "Well, it would be my privilege to do so." Somehow the humble part had kind of slipped away. And then on the third time they asked me, "Would you like to lead sadhana?" I said, "Naturally." And so by the end of the week, or the 2 weeks, I was feeling rather impressed. After all, I lead sadhana. I can chant. This is excellent. I'm getting somewhere now. And I was thinking this at our farewell lunch, and in the middle of the lunch, Roma just stopped and turned and said generally to the table, but I was facing her at the opposite end. She said, "Don't believe in spiritual hierarchy because it doesn't exist." And I kind of went, oh. Good point. Why doesn't it exist? Yogananda explained that you can visualize us all as souls coming from the ocean of God, Spirit, and that the souls are, you can visualize each wave as a soul. Now, he said the taller the wave, the more it is yearning to separate from the ocean of God. And so the smaller the wave, the more it is trying to be absorbed into the ocean. And so he said the saints are the tiny waves on the ocean, that there's barely a difference between them and God. And so in that sense, we don't really want to rise, we want to fall, meaning we want to merge back into the ocean. So again, on the spiritual path, everything kind of gets flipped around. And it's as if Divine Mother is holding the ladder of attainment for us. She just holds it here, and we kind of climb up the ladder sometimes and feel like, look how tall I am now, and then smack from some karma, and then we fall down several rungs, and we say, look how low I am, especially look at all those other people up there compared to me. So we climb up. There's no end to the ladder. The goal is not to get to the top. The goal is to jump off the ladder into Divine Mother's arms. Say, I see your game. I'm not playing this. My hands are tired. You carry me. Now, to balance this, of course, we could take this in the wrong direction and say, well, then I will just sit and love God all the time. And though certainly we should love God all the time, we can't, the Gita says, get anywhere by not acting. Yogananda said that to a disciple, basically, who said, if the goal of life is to non-attainment in God, non-action in God, then shouldn't we not act? And Yogananda said, try it. Because even in non-acting, we are exerting willpower. We are, again, kind of separating ourselves. If someone says, would you mind making breakfast? And we say, I can't. I'm not acting. We are actively resisting that request. And it's true that we gain, of course, in service and by letting God act through us. But we can make breakfast in two ways. We can be like, I don't have enough time for this. I don't know why I should have to make the breakfast after all this. And, I'm going to have to clean the pots too. And this is not a personal example. Or we can say, we can think of God the whole time. We can hum, we can chant, we can think of, whoever all we're making breakfast for. We can say, God, I didn't even notice. Yogananda asked the monks to pour a huge foundation for India Center. This was at Hollywood Church, just over there. And they had to pour the concrete for 23 and a half hours to prevent any seaming. So they had to do it continuously. And so many of the monks, they were just chanting and working together. And Swami Kriyananda was at the cement mixer, shoveling sand and whatever else goes into a cement mixer. And in fact, one of the monks later said to him, like 20, 30 years later, we were so exhausted trying to keep up with you because you were the source and you were shoveling it all in and we had to empty it out so you could shovel it more in. But one monk said, this is ridiculous. This is not spiritual. This is not sadhana. I have come to meditate. And so I didn't come to pour cement. And so he sat out to the side and the others just kept working and he reminded them throughout, this is ridiculous. You're all indentured servants or whatever he said. And at the end of the 23 and a half hours, he was exhausted and the others were still full of energy. And we know that experience, how often our thoughts can exhaust us or torture us, where we can be so focused on something that is wrong and horrible and disastrous, and then we find out actually that thing didn't even happen. You know, like I thought I parked on the Monday side of the street, and now I have a ticket. I can't believe, and then you go and find you parked on the Tuesday side of the street, and everything is okay. As we say in Hindi in India, sab theek hai, everything is okay. And so, another point to consider, though, in this is that it is not that, I don't know quite how to explain this, but it's not that devotees rise from a high point higher or they fall from a low point lower. Usually the question of whether we rise or fall is at the same point. In other words, when we're broken, we can either break in the favor of saying, okay, God, you take over, what a mess I've made, or we can break in the direction of this, just clinging and saying this is horrible and anything, and forgetting God and staying closed. I was thinking, in fact, that Yogananda was, of course, a great saint, a man of God, an avatar, but he still played out the human drama, if only for our benefit. And one of the things that fueled him to rise as a devotee was his mother's death when he was a young boy. So it isn't that it was from a point of glory that he sailed forth, it was from a point of devastation. He said he long sought to recapture the vision of her two dark eyes that he had lost. And finally it was Divine Mother who appeared to him after, I think, months of weeping and every day just listlessly going out to a shaoli tree and meditating and just, you know, being forsaken. And when Divine Mother appeared to him, she said, basically, it is I who loved thee through your mother. It is I who have loved you in many lives through all the mothers you've had. And so he felt that pain finally cured. But he didn't leapfrog over that. Well, my mother died, but I know God is the mother of all mothers, so devotees don't suffer, so therefore, since I'm a devotee, I don't suffer. We can't do a little leapfrog over the test because there's a knot in us that has to get worked out. Swami Kriyananda was walking along a beach questioning the meaning of life before he got on the spiritual path, worried and confused and thinking, no one has ever talked about this before. Nothing I've ever read about leads me to think that anyone has really found these answers. And when he finally realized the answer is to seek God on his own, meaning on his own he realized that he still didn't have any answers. He didn't know of anyone who'd ever done that. And so he felt, am I losing my mind? He thought, even if I am, I have to be sincere to this. So again, his rising onto the spiritual path was born out of great suffering, out of being broken open. And even his mother wrote a letter to Paramhansa Yogananda after Swami Kriyananda moved into the monastery and said she thanked Yogananda for all the help that he had given to Swami Kriyananda, her son. And we can infer from that how she must have seen him listless and unhappy before meeting him and how much happier he was now. And from my own experience, when I was getting onto the spiritual path and reading Autobiography of a Yogi and starting to learn to meditate and all these things, I was very excited and exuberant, as many people are. And as Swami Kriyananda said, the family can sometimes get quite disturbed, and it certainly didn't help that in their worry about my sanity, that I was trying to convince them that this was the most sane thing to do. And my father is from India and my mother's from America, and my wife and I spent 4 years in India, and we found a similar thing around some Indian families, that there was a real concern that the child would go off to the Himalayas. Here we sort of laugh and say, oh, you're going to go off to the mountains, and there it was real, because the Himalayas are right there, and you can go. And so we had to sort of deal with that there. And so in this case, my father was very concerned, and in his efforts to save me, he didn't mind if he killed me in the process trying to save me. But he was arguing against the spiritual path, and he was saying all these things against it. And this was hard for me, of course. This was a big test because I loved my father and I also loved the spiritual path, and I didn't want to have to fight between them. But at one point, he and my cousin got together to say to me, okay, we're going to break you of this delusion. And my father was very good at finding different reasons to prove his point, but I was very good at outwitting him, because partly I had years of practice, on this debate. And so, he would say things like, there are many cults out there. Say, that's true. And they separate people from their families. That's true. And they try to take the people's money. That's true too. And they break the people's will. Yes. And that is what you are getting involved in. I said, how do you know? You've never read a single book. You've never gone to the website. You've never met anyone from there. You've never visited. You don't know a thing about it. He said, well, I don't have time to do all of that research. I said, you have time for your opinions. But until your opinions are informed, I have no time to listen to them. And it was, I have to admit, his sense of fair-mindedness that he backed down, just like, well, logically speaking. Obviously, these arguments aren't logical, but that was the weapon at the moment. But then he brought in my cousin. Now, my cousin was also from India. He was a mathematician, very brilliant guy, much smarter than I am. And I thought, okay, obviously it's kind of like, now I'm with the heavyweight. I've kind of won the middleweight, now it's the heavyweight. But I still weigh the same, and this is, he's looking pretty big. And so I was there. This was a sequence of sessions, you could say, over a weekend. Not a very pleasant way to spend Christmas. And at one point, I was taking a break from all this, and I thought, okay, if he says this, I can say that. And if he goes down this, then I can turn it around that way. And then I had this thought, you are not going to win. And I thought, it's very possible that I will not be able to out-logic because he's so smart. And so I decided in that moment, if I get completely confused, then I'm just going to build a wall between my head and my heart. And I'm going to let my head be completely shaken, but I'm not going to let it touch my heart, because I know what I'm doing is right for me. And so I went back in there and just got completely decapitated, you could say. And basically at one point he said, again, out of concern, I don't want to misrepresent it, but it was sort of a concern expressed in a somewhat vigorous way. He said, how do you know that this is the right thing for you? How do you know that 10 years from now you aren't going to regret this? That you're not going to look back and say, what a mistake I made. What a waste all this time was. Why did I leave the PhD program, which I was leaving? And now my life is ruined. What is your guarantee that you are not making a mistake? What could I say? Honestly, there is no answer to that, I feel. I don't know. I can't promise that 10 years from now I won't have said it was a mistake. And so I got really shaken, because at that moment I didn't have any kind of an answer. And the wall was there, and on some level my heart was safe, but I was also miserable. I say this because, again, something good came out of it, don't worry. As Dharmini sometimes asks me, look, just tell me, is it a happy ending? There's this whole long story, and so, has a happy ending. That in the evening, I realized, because I knew there had to be an answer, and after many tears and Kleenex, I realized that the answer was, I don't know, but I have faith. I have faith that God loves me, that I love God, that if I move in the direction of God, and even if I do so wrongly, that God will still guide me to the right thing. I believe in a benevolent God and a benevolent universe and a benevolent fate. Doesn't mean it's painless, but still benevolent. As Swami Kriyananda has said, we can take our great pains as the sign of God's compassion, because God is compassionately trying to heal us. And sometimes pain does accompany healing, but he's saying there's a little pain to spare you the big pain. And so out of that crisis for me was born a greater faith. And so instead of asking how devotees rise, we can also ask from where devotees rise, because devotees rise from the ashes. Usually we have been burnt to a crisp, and then like the phoenix, we emerge from the ashes. So again, when we find we're at our lowest point, we can always say, well, if I'm at the lowest point, the good news is the only direction from here is up, because I'm at the bottom after all. And so why is it happening? It's always happening because on some level God is trying to purify us. I don't say that inhumanely or unkindly to say, well, God's trying to purify you. Sorry you had to get hit by a car, but we have to be compassionate. We can't say to someone, well, that's your karma. We have to feel. We have to be real and sincere. Truth is always kind. But at the same time, we have to just remember that this world will go on like this. We will make all kinds of mistakes. We will have all kinds of successes. But really, we only need to love God throughout. And that's the ultimate success. I wanted to close with something Swami Kriyananda said recently. He gave a radio interview on Thursday, and the interviewers asked him, is there any message you'd like to leave our listeners with? And if you'd like to listen to the whole interview, it's on our website, anandala.org. He says, in the last run, the only thing that's important is love God. God is infinitely lovable. People think of him as a stern judge. He's not that. He's your own higher self. And he is the most lovable thing in the universe. Love him and love him for his bliss. God bless you.
I wanted to just say one thing before we have our wonderful music, and that is just a little explanation for my absence for months. About 6 years ago, I got parasites in India, and it has been just an amazing journey, not one that I would have chosen, but obviously one from karma. And karma is not necessarily the thing you tell someone when they're in the thick of everything. You know, like, oh, gee, I'm so sorry you're so sad. Well, you know it's your karma, you know, which is a true statement. But, you know, it's one thing to have a hard time, get fired. We all go through a lot of things. It's a very interesting thing to have a disease and to have no energy to do anything and have to drag yourself around for 6 years. And luckily, recently, I've come upon, I've gone through a lot of different healing modalities, allopathic, every single kind of natural thing you can do, I've been doing. And recently and they've all helped, and I've slowly improved. But recently came upon something that's really actually been amazing and given me more energy. So I feel like now I can actually be present. I can actually have energy to be with people. And I don't know if the parasites are gone, but I'm hoping that they'll find their way out of the body. I'm still doing a ton of herbs that are supposed to get rid of them, but I've tried so far every herb under the sun. And the internet has a lot of information on parasites and getting rid of parasites. They're protozoa, though, just so you know, not worms. Protozoa are like an infection. It's a lot different than just doing a cleanse and getting a worm out of your body. So anyway, though, I wanted to say hi. For those of you I don't know yet, hello. I hope to get to know you now. And for those who have been friends for a while, hello again. And let's have service.